This is Muhammad حمودة speaking. Today we are going to talk about the problem of equivalence, the translation into Arabic of specialized technological texts. Actually, equivalence. This problem or finding an equivalent term into the source language or finding an equivalent term of the source language in the target language. This problem is widely investigated in translation studies, and most of the time the lack of equivalence is characterized. And how can we overcome this issue? How can we produce new equivalent terms that serve uh, that reflect the intended meanings of the source language expressions and so on? Today, we are going to talk about the equivalence or the problem of equivalence in a technological text or in a technological and technical context in general. In this study or in this lecture, we are going to talk about two main things. The first one is the translation of uh, a pure technological text or open access texts. And the second one or next lecture, we are going to continue and talk about limited access texts. So, in this context, we are going to address the problem of equivalence in two dimensions. The first dimension is the open access texts or the open access texts. Okay. The second one is the limited access texts. But before that, what is the difference between the two things? Actually, open access texts, these texts are most of the time are deeply rooted in technology and web service technology also. Open means it is available to all members in the society, either they older people or young people, children, youth, women, men, and so on. So open open access text refers to a text which is available to all عفواً, to all members in the society, while limited access text, these texts are specialized, highly specialized. Why? Because they are limited to a specific type of people, scientists or specialists in a specific field. Okay. uh, as you know, actually, the translation of open access texts to some extent will be easier than the translation of limited access texts. Both text types will include technological terms, but or technological devices, but the limited access texts will include more specialized texts, more specialized items. Okay, so in true or false or in true or false, if we say that limited access texts are more difficult to be translated than the open access text, the the right answer is true. Okay, but the opposite is false. Okay, now let us move to talk about open access texts. These are unnecessary information. We are going to highlight the most important issues in this study. Okay, okay, we are going open access texts as you see here. Okay. Actually, first of all, the definition of open access text, as we said, that these texts are deeply rooted in technological fields and in web service technology, and these texts are open to all members of the society, regardless their educational level or their gender. Okay. Now, the characteristics of open access text. The first important characteristic is that simplicity in language use. Most of the time, open access texts, the language of open access texts are so easy, simple. Why? Because it addresses all people, or these texts usually address all people in general, regardless their educational level and regardless their gender, their age, and so on. So, to be suitable to all members of the society, or to all people in general, it should be, or the language should be simple and easy and can be understood easily. But some technical or some texts may include neologisms. Neologisms refer to a new coined lexemes which are not found before in the language. Okay, so, because open texts usually, or technological devices usually are inventions or are new inventions, their names may be new, and their names may be unknown by the people. So, neologisms usually can be used in open access texts, and this makes these texts more difficult, but it is still easy. Why? Because the majority of the lexemes and the overall language used is simple. Okay, the second characteristic is multifunctional. طيب نيجي multi معناها متعدد. اوكي، functional وظائف. اذا open access text usually متعددة الوظائف. multi functional. Why? Because it addresses, or these texts address several all people in the society, and several and and this, so it intended to serve mixed audience. This makes it multifunctional. It has several functions, or it conveys several functions. The same text can convey several functions at the same time. Okay, and this is very important characteristic. So the main two characteristics of open access text, the first one is simplicity of language use. The second one is multifunctional. Okay. Now, translating for a non-specialized audience. Actually, when we translate open access texts, we usually translate to non-specialized audience. Why? Because these texts address all members, as we said, these texts usually address all members of the society, and this makes the translator introduces his translation or her translated version to a non-specialized audience. So, the simplicity of language of the original text should be maintained and reflected in the target language text. Okay, so as long as the source text is simple, also the target text should be simple in terms of language use, the because this or these texts usually address non-specialized audience. Uh, regardless, or these audience vary in terms of their educational backgrounds, their educational levels, their backgrounds or cultural backgrounds, and also their gender. Okay, so they differ a lot. Uh, another so So the features or the motives of emergency of these types of audience is the first motive is globalization. Globalization refers to the openness in economy يعني الانفتاح الاقتصادي على الجميع. globalization usually العولمة تشير إلى الانفتاح ال- الاقتصادي لدى الجميع. أوكي وبالتالي so this makes the communication process much easier and the interact between different cultures and between different languages more common, and this makes the spread and this leads to the spread of non-specialized texts or open access texts. Okay, the second feature is in the second feature of emergency or non-specialized audience is the easy internet access. It is very easy. When you nowadays while you are holding your mobile phone, you can connect the internet, connect or can you can be connected to the internet and make a video call or send a message while you are sitting or while you are walking in the street and so on. So the internet connection or the internet access is very easy. This is the first reason, and the second reason is globalization, which turns our world into a small village. Okay, now open texts are promotional texts usually. Okay. Most of the time, or most of the open access texts usually have a proportional nature. What's meant by proportional? It makes يعني جانب من الدعاية الإعلامية، إن جانب من التسويق للمنتجات and so the characteristics of the promotional texts usually the use of hyperbole, frequent use of adjectives and adverbs, short sentences, ambiguity in an attractive way, using imperative, avoidance of negatives, present tense, repetition, alteration, syntactic parallelism, and so on. So these we have several characteristics of the proportional texts, and most of these characteristics can be figured out in uh, open access texts. First, to talk about these characteristics, okay, uh, before 3 years or 5 years, لاحظنا انتشار في قطاع غزة، لاحظنا انتشار لوحات إعلانية موجود فيها مين سليم. الآن الشركات ما حكت المقصود منها but it leaves the space to the people to think about or and to guess what is meant by mean Salim. We usually think uh, while I am going to the university at that time, I usually whenever I read mean Salim, I usually think about it what is meant by this. It may be one, it may be هيك فقعدت كنا نخمن كتير. حتى في المحاضرات كنا نخمنها أيضا. في النهاية طلعت مين سليم مقصود فيها إنه شركة الاتصالات عملتها كإعلان. مين سليم يعني عنده خط إنترنت خاص فيه مش ماخد من جاره خط تاني، وبالتالي بتكون معلوماته أكثر سرية وأكثر أمانا وبالتالي هذه عملت astonishment عنا. إذن promotional texts usually create some sort of ambiguity. These texts are ambiguous. We guess and think about the intended meaning or the intended message. As long as we guess and we have several options, uh, its ambiguity is raised. Okay. uh, high example. This is an example. طيب, alliteration usually or repetition. present tense texts also hyperbole دائما بكون فيها مغالاة في الشغلة، إنه إحنا الأفضل، أفضل شركة، أفضل، وبالتالي بكون فيها مغالاة وبنستخدم superlative adjectives. Usually the use of superlative adjectives. أفضل منتج، أكثر نعومة للشعر نفترض في المنتجات التانية، وبالتالي إحنا دائما بنستخدم هايبربل، بنستخدم نوع من الهايبربل والسوبرلاتيف adjectives. Okay. Also, usually most of the promotional texts usually short include short sentences. Why? Because attractive and short sentences. Why? To attract the attention of the reader and also to encourage the reader to read. Because if it is, for example, 7 or 5 lines, usually we come across or readers come across this promotional text without reading it because it is long. While if it is only 3 or 4 words or one sentence or two sentences, this encourages the reader to read. As I said, mean Salim, it is very short and it encourages the reader to think about it, to read this message, and to think about the intended messages of this short sentence. Okay, now technological texts are primarily characterized by the use of neologisms, and we said that neologisms are new coined terms in the language because technological inventions usually new inventions, and these inventions are unknown before, and we need to create a new term or to establish a new term which is not known before to refer to this new invention. Okay. طيب, open access texts and the translation strategy. Actually, most of the time, or a lot of, we have several translation strategies that can be used to render specific or to render open access texts. But here we said that most of the writers or most of the authors encourage or support the use of adaptation strategy to enrich, because this strategy enriches the language, the target language, and makes the readers better understand the open or the information included in the open texts. Okay, now we can also, regarding the open text, we can differentiate between two main types of open texts. The first one purely technological, and the second one is non-specialized texts. Now, regarding the purely technological texts, um, these texts usually include, okay, such as look at server and domain. Translated term is server khadim, while Arabized term server. Okay, Arabized or transcribed terms or transliterated term or transliterated strategy. Transliteration may refers to the adaptation of the English pronunciation using Arabic alphabets. So server كتبناها سيرفر باستخدام حروف اللغة العربية، هذه بنسميها Arabization أو transcription. أوكي. طيب translated term or equivalent term خادم. طيب most of the time we notice that people usually use server rather than خادم, and this is a really important problem that we should overcome. Why? If as long as we find, or as long as we have a well established term or equivalent term in the Arabic language, it is better to use the equivalent term rather than the Arabized term. But the spread of the Arabized term server is resulted from نتج عن اللي هو التأخر، أو تأخر في إنتاج اللي هو مصطلح مكافئ اللي هو الخادم. فهذا التأخر أصبح الناس يستخدموا سيرفر Arabization سيرفر على على Arabized term سيرفر على نطاق واسع جدا. لما اجى الترانزليتد تيرم اللي هو الخادم بعد فترة طويلة أصبح ما استخدموه الناس كتير بسبب وجود اللي هو الأرابايزد تيرم. طيب دومين، نطاق ودومين. actually it is better to use نطاق rather than domain. اوكي. طيب نيجي non-technological terms. These non-technological terms, they are not technologically related, or these terms are not technologically bound, but they are frequently used in technological contexts and technological texts in general. Okay, the first term is, so the difference between non-technological terms and purely technological terms. Purely technological terms are terms that are or terms that have technological nature. Okay, but non-technological terms, these terms are not technologically bound, but they are frequently used in technological contexts. Okay, the first one is hosting. طيب transliterated ممكن احنا نحكي استضافة أو تسكين. الأفضل استضافة لأنها بتعطينا أكتر المعنى، تعكس المعنى بشكل أكبر. عند الأرابايز تيرم اللي هو الهوست زي ما هو. application تطبيق، application ممكن باك اب دعم، باك اب بانر الشريط الإعلاني and بانر. طيب نيجي لهوستنج الاستضافة. أول حاجة احنا الأفضل or it is better to use the transliterated term استضافة to render hosting. Okay, because we have an equivalent term which reflects the intended, or which is fully reflected the intended meaning, or fully reflecting the intended meaning. But in the names of the companies usually say عراقي هوست أو مكتب هوست لخدمات الويب المتكاملة، شركة ميجا فور هوست. الأفضل في هذه الحالة إني أستخدم الترانسليتريتد تيرم. واي يعني الآن لو إحنا استخدمناها في موقع عادي أو سياق تكنولوجي، بستخدم الأفضل إن أستخدم استضافة اللي هو transliterated term. ولكن لو كانت اسم شركة هوست موجودة في اسم شركة، الأفضل إن أستخدم الأرابيزيشن استراتيجي وأكتبها هوست، لسبب واحد: ما يكون عندي double names، ما يكون عندي more than we do not want to have more than one name to the same company. اوكي، يعني ما يكون عندنا اكثر من اسم لنفس الشركة، وبالتالي ممكن في هذه الحالة نستخدم الارابايزد والافضل ان نستخدم الارابايزد. ولكن other than in other contexts we use استضافة because it is better Okay. Regarding تطبيق and application, it is better to use تطبيق. Even in Google, Google apps usually translated as تطبيقات جوجل باللغة العربية. بنلاقي موقع جوجل كتبها تطبيقات جوجل، ما كتبها جوجل ابلكيشن. اوكي. طيب، باك اب. باك اب means النسخ الاحتياطي. طيب، الأكتر إحنا بنلاحظ إنه باك اب مستخدمة أكتر من النسخ الاحتياطي. يعني ال transliterated term is more frequent than النسخ الاحتياطي. Why? As we said, because of the late attempts or the attempts of producing a new equivalent term comes very late. يعني تأخرت كتير. اوكي. طيب، ممكن نستخدمها الشريط الإعلاني. الأفضل إن أستخدمها الشريط الإعلاني. اوكي. طيب، نجي commercial texts are usually most of the commercial texts usually are highly hybrid. طيب، نيجي ل hybrid language. Hybrid language refers to the time of language, or the language refers to the type of language which is mixed from, or it is a mixed language. Hybrid language is a mixed languages. يعني a combination of more than one language. For example, look at this text. عندنا هيكل الخادم وكتب لي إياه باللغة الإنجليزية. إذا أنا بلاحظ إنه أنا عندي two languages. هاي عندي واحدة، وعندي هاي اللغة الإنجليزية واللغة العربية. هذه بنسميها إحنا hybrid language. So it is a mixed language. Its vocabulary comes from two languages or more than two languages, more than one language I mean. Okay. طيب، هايبريد سينتاكس يعني استخدمناها، احنا اضفنا syntactic features from one language into another language. يعني hosting، ترجمناها استضافات. طيب، أنا هنا الألف والتاء هذه إحنا بنستخدمها في اللغة العربية to make the feminine character, to refer to the feminine character. أوكي. وبالتالي أنا لما استخدمت استضافات وضفت لها ألف تاء خليتها feminine in the Arabic language. So hosting is in rendering hosting into استضافات we includes a syntactic change or a syntactic or hybrid syntax. Why? Because of the inflection of at as a plural feminine, or to refer to the plural feminine character. نفس الحاجة سيرفرات، application applicationات. بلاحظ ان انا ضفت at to refer to the feminine character. اوكي. يعني عندي استضافات، hosting، بانر نفس حاجة بانر، فأنا عملت لها arabization، بعدين ضفت لها الألف والتاء to make it feminine. أوكي. وبالتالي صار عندي أنا two languages. عندي الإنجليزية من الإنجليزية بانر، وعندي الآت من من Arabic syntax، من السنتاكس اللغة العربية. طيب، hybrid text structure. This structure is affected, or this text is affected by the structure of more than one language. It is a combination of or its structure is a combination of several rules from two languages, such as market host. طيب، بنلاحظ انه عندي host Arabization تقدم لكم استضافة مواقع الإنترنت على سيرفراتنا. هاي عندي سيرفراتنا تشينج ولا لا؟ سيرفرات أنا ضفت لها الألف والتاء توميك فيمينين، توميك فيمينين ونا المتكلمين، وبالتالي أنا صار عندي syntactic تشينج، يعني قاعدة، صار عندي قواعد، عندي structure أكتر من لغة. هنا النص نفسه يحتوي على structure of the rules from structural rules of two languages or more. أوكي. تتمتع بالسرعة والكفاءة العالية والوجود الدائم على الشبكة والمتابعة المستمرة وتقديم. أوكي. والخدمات المجانية. أوكي. I hope you get a lot of benefits. This is the end of this part. يعني إحنا to summarize what we have said, we address several issues. The first one, the meaning of access text or open access texts, and we said that these texts are deeply rooted in technology in general and in web service technology in particular. The characteristics of these texts are usually simplicity of language and multifunctionality, or these texts usually are multifunctional. uh, Also, we talked about the non-specialized audience, and we said that most of the audience, or most of the open text audience, are non-specialized because these texts usually address all people in general, regardless their education, regardless their gender and their cultural background, or even their nationalities. Okay. And we said that most of the time, or most of the time, researchers support the use of adaptation strategy to render these texts usually. And that's the end. Thank you very much for listening.